I think if you want to be the best at anything, you have to make it your life. Most champions will say that they made a lot of sacrifices that probably hurt some people along the way. You have to ride that line and get as close to the edge of sacrificing everything else in order to be the best.
This is the questions we get a lot, is how do I find my passion?
Yeah.
How do I find my purpose? Can you pinpoint things that you were doing that kind of lined up right?
A lot of people are afraid of failure. The idea of failing is so daunting that people don't end up trying things. Trying new things is another way to maybe find your purpose. But if you're afraid to try things because you're afraid to fail, you may never be able to get there. And even if you fail and you're still alive, you can go and try something new until you find something that you're not going to fail in.
Welcome back to Mulligan Brewers, and today's interview is with one of the fittest men on earth, Noah Ohlsen. We flew out to Miami to capture this incredible conversation about how to build mental fortitude and build the greatest, fittest body that you possibly can. And he implements a few different tools that if you hang about to the end of the video, you'll be able to use to change your life. Today's video, as always, is sponsored by Marek Health. Go to the link down below and find out more. I'll talk about them a little bit later on in the video. I also want to say a massive thank you to all our Patreon supporters who make this possible. Being able to fly around the world with our film crew is down to you guys. And because of that, you get exclusive benefits, early access, ad-free content, and follow-up conversations and behind the scenes and more stuff like this, only available on Patreon with the link down below. Thank you to our Patreon members. Let's dive into this amazing episode with one of the fittest men on planet Earth, telling you exactly how he did it.
Well, thank you for today already.
Pleasure. Thank you guys.
We always do just introduce yourself and what you do.
My name is Noah Ohlsen. I am a professional fitness athlete and I live here in Miami, Florida.
We have like a split audience. We've got US, American, Australian, it's quite global.
Cool.
How would you describe where you grew up in your childhood and especially to a UK audience?
So I was born in the northeast part of the United States in a little state called Rhode Island, but my family moved down to Florida when I was very young. So I've grown up near the Miami area pretty much my whole life. And I think based on the nature of Florida being kind of outdoorsy and active, I grew up playing a little bit of everything sports-wise: softball, soccer, football. When I was 5 years old, I started playing lacrosse, was kind of the main sport that I thought I was going to become a professional at when I got older. I'll leave that at that.
When did you recognize athletic ability? Were you always really ripped and in shape? When was it a point where there was, a tip?
I think that as I was growing up, I was probably relatively average in most of the sports that I played. I never excelled to the point where I was the all-star. When I started to get better at lacrosse, that was the one thing that I felt like I could take pretty far and had some aspirations of becoming a pro in. But when I got to high school, I stopped playing lacrosse because our school didn't have a team. And at that point, my dreams of becoming a professional athlete kind of faded away and was focused more on school and getting a job, studied psychology and was pretty good at math. And so the professional athlete aspirations, I think, disappeared from probably age 15 until maybe 22 when I first found CrossFit when I was a second year at the University of Miami here.
The studying of psychology, we'll dive into that in a second. But
cool.
I'm curious, I'd seen the word used quite a lot. I think it was a way you've self-described as a kid was a scrawny kid.
Yeah.
We see you working out today, physically formidable, physique, and the idea of you being scrawny is hard to fathom. But I think it's good context for people who are oh yeah, but he was gifted as a god when he was born, and he came out with biceps and a six-pack. Is that the case or?
No. I definitely grew up on the smaller side. I think my freshman year of high school, which I know the lingo can be a little different depending on where you're from, but when I was 15 years old, I weighed just over 100 pounds, so probably 50 kilos. I wrestled in the 112-pound weight class in high school, and I was so scrawny and skinny. I had long blonde hair. Then my nickname was Cutie, which at the time I did not like. When you're a high school boy, you want to be like tough and cool, and to get your cheeks pinched and called Cutie. And I think they meant it in an affectionate way, but I hated it. And so at that time, I started to get into a little bit of weightlifting and actually training rather than just playing the sports that I was doing. And from my first year of high school to my last, I had started to kind of catch up to an average sized boy my age. And probably once I got into university and actually started doing some of this training where it was more full body exercises, using a barbell for squats and deadlifts rather than just bench press and bicep curls, that was when I really started to add a little bit of muscle to my frame and get a bit denser.
Where did the mindset come from and the mentality? Because I usually find with a lot of athletes, it's not once you meet the sport, it sort of exists prior to that, maybe through childhood or competitiveness with siblings or something. Like, can you pinpoint where the mentality? Because your mindset today is insane. Like, it's crazy what you're putting yourself through.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Looking back, I don't know if there was ever a time where I had a particular moment or person or reason that I was really motivated to pursue greatness. I honestly don't think it was until I got into doing what I do now that I realized there was a path for me to make a name for myself, be proud of myself, create a life that I would be able to stand out and like have a little bit of a legacy. I think once that started to all take shape and I realized that that was possible, then I started to get motivated to be able to do that. But prior to that, I was still just figuring it all out. You know, even when I started doing this at 20 years old, I didn't know who my identity was. I didn't know the type of person that I wanted to be. I feel like I was trying to, for a while, act in the way that I thought I was supposed to. I thought a professional athlete, when I was first starting to take that role, had to be tough and confident. And so I acted tough and I acted confident, but it wasn't genuine. And I felt this internal struggle of trying to be something that I wasn't yet. And when I finally came to terms with just being myself, it kind of allowed me to just breathe and relax and to be more genuine and to feel like I wasn't forcing anything.
This is really exciting to me because I think most of the time when we speak to people, a lot of the conversation is around that they always knew, they always felt this way. And I think our audience finds themselves in a place where they don't, and they are seeking and they are trying to find themselves and they're trying to find what their passion is, what their purpose is. Was there a moment where you sat down and you're like, right, I need to, because this is the questions we get a lot is how do I find my passion?
Yeah.
How do I find my purpose? Did it happen? And if it did just happen, can you pinpoint things that you were doing that kind of lined up right?
I think that there is an element of luck to finding your purpose. I think for me, I kind of got lucky that I stumbled upon this lifestyle. I wasn't even familiar with the world of functional fitness, competitive CrossFit until I stepped into it. Had I not seen a random poster of a gentleman who owns the gym that we're in now that was a mentor of mine for quite some time and is now one of my best friends, if I hadn't seen a poster of him and said, hey, I want to look like that guy, let me look this place up and see what it is, I maybe never would have gone down this path. I might have gotten my degree in psychology and be sitting in an office as a psychologist. So I think that I did kind of get lucky in finding this. Maybe I would have found it in another way if it hadn't happened in that way. But I think for a lot of people, there is an element of getting lucky. I think you can search for it. I think you can actively try to find your purpose. My wife, for a long time, has kind of been trying to figure out what her purpose is, something that would give her this passion and excitement for life. And she graduated with a degree, started to utilize that in marketing, realized it wasn't for her, went back to school, became a physical therapist, is doing that now and really loves it, but still feels like it's not like her thing that she was put on this earth to do. And she hasn't found that thing yet. And we've talked about it before. How can we find that? Is it something that you can intentionally seek out? Can we look it up online, take a quiz that's going to tell her you're made for this? And it hasn't happened yet. So I think hopefully for her and for other people out there, and luckily for me, there is this element of luck where your path happens to cross with somebody or something at the perfect moment that sends you on the path to your purpose. So if it hasn't happened for you yet, don't give up. I think maybe it's still out there. If it never does, try to make the most of whatever you're doing now until you do find the next thing that gives you more purpose.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially the way you spoke about your wife there. I think sometimes we don't find it, but it feels like we're on the path.
Just kidding.
It feels like we're on the path, like we're getting closer to feeling right.
Yeah.
And I think there's a intention. I think that's the most important thing about having an intention, having an openness to, I'm trying to find something. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm trying to find it. And really great what you just said, like, don't be disheartened. Like if it isn't, some people find it at 50, 60 years old.
Yeah, for sure. My mom, to continue kind of bringing people in my life into the picture, my mom she probably wouldn't want me to say this. Let's just say she's getting close to 60 years old. And she just texted me the other day that she's the happiest and most confident that she's ever been in her life. And she had a big life change about 10 years ago. And so it is cool to know that for me in 30 years, the same thing could happen. I could be even happier then than I am now, which is hard to imagine because I'm pretty happy now. But to take it back to something that you said a second ago, I think a lot of people are afraid of failure. Rightfully so. I am too. It's scary to step onto the competition floor and know that there's the possibility of failing, especially when it's in front of thousands of people. But just in everyday life, the idea of failing is so daunting that oftentimes people don't end up trying things. And trying new things is another way to maybe find your purpose. But if you're afraid to try things because you're afraid to fail, you may never be able to get there. And that's something that my wife and I have spoken about as well, that it's okay if you go to PT school for 3 years, practice for a year, realize it's not for you. Okay, that was 4 years of your life that you spent working towards that, but you still hopefully have another 50, 60 years of living. You could do that 10 more times until you find the thing that brings you the most joy. And I think a lot of people are really afraid to go there and to step into something big and scary that they could fail because of the label of failure or how painful it might be, how sad it might be. But even if you fail and you're still alive, you can go and try something new until you find something that you're not going to fail in.
I also think, yeah, the dots, I think it was Steve Jobs who said this about, like, you can't connect the dots looking forward, but you can looking back. And like that degree that you did, you might have learned something in a certain subject.
Absolutely.
When it comes to the business that you're super passionate about is very relevant. I mean, that's happened to me multiple times. Like, I studied business. I wasn't a massive fan of it. And then I started filmmaking, and then lo and behold, had to start a business on the side of that. And I knew these things. And it does have relevance. And I think that's where, if you do everything with a bit of passion and you try and find purpose in the thing that you're doing, eventually I think it pays off.
Yeah.
And really interesting. I love the way you spoke about the fear of failure. We speak about that with my brothers quite a bit. It's quite sad that some people won't risk failure, so much so that they just don't even try anyway. And it's like that idea to me is difficult, especially when someone's likes the idea of maybe starting a business, starting a sport, or but they don't want to look silly. They don't want to fail. Yeah. So they don't even give it a go anyway. That is the perfect way to fail, is because you never got a shot.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think most people respect the person that tries and fails more than the person that doesn't try at all. I actually had a realization of that recently that was enlightening for me. I've done only CrossFit for the last decade. I tossed my hat in the ring with an Ironman recently and was so far away from being world class at that, but I documented the process of starting from scratch, having done almost no endurance training until race day when my friends and I did Ironman Florida. And I think people related to that maybe even more so than they have to my CrossFit career at this point, because it's more relatable, right? You're like, somebody else out there might want to try something, but they don't know where to start because they've never done it before. And so to see somebody else go from 0 and say, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to try to figure it out. And I may not be the best, but I'm going to get as close as I can to it until this set goal time frame of mine. And to see some failure along the way, to learn as you go, I think that is more inspiring to people than the person that you mentioned earlier that's just naturally gifted. And you're sitting at home watching and you're like, well, I can never do that. They must have been born that way. So you just kind of check out and watch as a spectator versus being like, I was just like that guy before he started. So maybe I can try it and get to where he is now too.
I was really impressed. I saw you did a marathon, the Miami Marathon.
Yeah.
And you did like a 3 hour 40, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. But you know, I was super impressed by that, given the fact you've never trained, you've never done endurance, you know, you're first time running a marathon. And then, you know, if you'd have put up a really, really impressive time, it probably would have been lost on me. Like, it would have been.
Oh, of course he did. He's a freak. Yeah.
But like, it's understanding that, you know, we are all human, and the success is in the distance that we've traveled. You know, it's that, and I don't mean that like literally, I just figuratively.
Yeah.
Because there's some people who are born billionaires, you know, born into a billionaire family, maybe run a successful business, fantastic. There's some people who are born into poverty and maybe start a very small business. That's defined as success.
Yeah.
Like, it's incredible.
And I think those stories are, people are able to relate to that more because you can see yourself in the position where they started and you can see the path. You can almost follow a similar path to the way that somebody that started at the bottom and got their way to the top was, versus somebody that's at the top. You don't see any of the process of how they got there. You just assume they were born that way, or they came into that money. It's part of their family. And there's no, what's the word that I'm looking for here? There's no like guideline.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right word. Man, I can't think. There's it's on the tip of my tongue, but
yeah,
basically when somebody sets the path for you, you can follow that. And I think that's really inspiring.
No, 100%. I agree. Yeah, being able to see yourself in those shoes and somewhat believe that you can do that too. That's the most important thing.
I think Nick Bear is a guy in our space that's done a really good job of that. When I first started to toy with the idea of doing an Ironman, I know that he had done something similar years ago. And he had a couple of videos like, my first Ironman, here's week 1 of training. And so I would go watch those videos, and seeing somebody starting from very little background in that to getting to his actual race day was more inspiring to me than the world's best Ironman posting the videos of his training that I can't even fathom because I'm nowhere near that level, but I was starting in the same place that Nick was when he started.
Great example is like watching him now to when he first started.
Yeah.
Like the time that he's changed, you know, his runs have changed, all that kind of stuff. It's like, it takes years and years and years.
For sure.
But if he hadn't got started for fear of failure or fear of looking like an idiot, then, you know, not that he did.
Quick similar note on that, and I know we've spent a long time on the same topic, but it also reminds me of when I'm making content, and I'm sure you guys are the same way. There's that analogy of like getting something 80% of the way there and then releasing it to the world versus waiting until it's 100%. Because sometimes it's never going to be 100%. So if you never publish the thing, you're not changing the world by not putting anything out there. But if you put a ton of stuff out there that's 80% done, 80% good in your eyes, it's going to be 100% impactful to somebody else.
I needed to hear that today. I'm very guilty of that, like not putting stuff out there. When was the moment where you fell in love? Like, you came to this gym, you know, you started working out. Was there a specific competition or something that happened where you're like, yeah, this is for me?
To be honest, it was my very first CrossFit workout that I fell in love. It was so different from everything that I had been doing. It kicked my butt. It was one of the hardest workouts that I'd ever done, which would be a deterrent for some people for sure. But I remember finishing the workout, going and sitting by the pool at the apartment complex that I lived at by myself, completely exhausted, but laying there and being like, that was awesome. I can't wait to do that again. And the rest was history. I got addicted to it really quickly, and shortly after realized that there was a big competition called the CrossFit Games that some people were pro at and would spend all their time pursuing. I decided that I wanted to commit to doing that, and this is back in 2012. 2014 was finally the first year that I qualified for the CrossFit Games, which are essentially the world championships for our sport. It happened to be the year that I was graduating the University of Miami with my master's degree in exercise science, strength and conditioning. So like you said, it kind of went hand in hand. Like my degree plays into what I do now to some degree, but I chose to, like, this was my path, school and getting a degree. CrossFit started, they kind of crossed paths, and then while using my degree faded into the background, my CrossFit career took off into the foreground at that fork in the road. And I've been professionally pursuing being the fittest man in the world for the last decade plus.
I've been getting tons of messages asking about my health protocols ever since I did the world's heaviest marathon. The experience took a toll, and getting back to optimal health has been an absolute journey. That's where Marek Health have been absolutely essential. Their approach is beyond quick fixes. It's about long-term health and performance. They work with medical professionals to create personalized, evidence-based plans tailored to your needs, using pharmaceutical-grade treatments and cutting-edge diagnosis. Whether it's TRT, peptides, supplements, or like me, getting full health analysis to get you back on track, Marek Health provides everything that you need. And it's not just for athletes. If you're an entrepreneur or businessman like me, you might want that renewed focus, clarity, and energy. That's when Marek Health can get your brain performing at its peak. From comprehensive blood work to customized health plans, Marek gives you the tools to optimize your life. If you're ready to take control of your health, go to marekhealth.com and use code Mulligan for 10% off. The link's down below. I can't recommend them enough. And if you just wanted to get started, I would go and get your blood work done. Go get assessed, find out where they can help you. Use the link down below for 10% off using code Mulligan. Let's dive back into the video.
Talk us through the qualification process and like just the basic sort of structure of how somebody can walk into a gym, go to qualifiers, get into CrossFit Games, all that kind of stuff.
That is one of the cool things about CrossFit, is that anybody literally can step in and make their way to the CrossFit Games. I guess it's like that with any sport, right? Any human can pick up a sport, work their way up the ranks, and become a professional. With CrossFit, I think at the beginning, it could happen a lot faster for people because it was such a new sport. If you were a very talented athlete in something else, you could step in to CrossFit, pick up on the skills, and find yourself at the CrossFit Games in a year or two. Now, it's become much more professional. The people that are doing it are full-time athletes training 5-6 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. So you can't just pick it up and all of a sudden become one of the best in the world the way you used to be able to 10 years ago. Qualification process basically starts with the open. So anybody in any CrossFit gym all over the world can sign up to participate in the CrossFit Open. They usually, one workout per week for 3 to 5 weeks are released to the entire community. You do the workout at your home gym with a judge, film it. If your scores are some of the top scores in the world, you have to submit your videos online to CrossFit. They'll validate your performance. If you qualify, you'll move on to the next stage, which has changed a bit over the years. It used to be regionals. Now there was quarterfinals and semifinals. We'll go with the old school method because it was a little simpler. So from the open, you'd qualify for regionals, which was an in-person competition. Typically the 40 top men and top women in any particular region would go compete for a weekend, usually 3 days of competing, 2 to 3 events per day. Pretty tough, grueling stuff, a mixture of weightlifting, aerobic conditioning, gymnastics, grunt work, Olympic lifting, all that. If you finished in the top 3 or 5 in your region, you would then qualify to the CrossFit Games, which are the World Championships, which are held once a year. They have gone from California to Madison, Wisconsin to Texas. Now they're in New York. And if you win the CrossFit Games, you are termed the fittest man or a woman on earth. That's essentially what everybody that competes is shooting for. Over the course of the last 15 years, there have only been, I want to say like 5 different guys who have earned that title, because there have been repeat champions, Rich Froning, Matt Fraser, Justin Medeiros, a couple guys over the years that have just been pretty dominant. I almost was one of those guys. My best finish ever was in 2019. I finished second. I was a few points away from being the fittest man on earth and achieving my dream. which is tough. It can be a little bit bittersweet. I intentionally choose to focus on the sweetness and not let the bitterness taint the fact that that's the best finish that I've ever had, and that I did achieve my goal that year of finally standing on the podium at the CrossFit Games. But that's essentially what this season looks like: Open, regionals, CrossFit Games. And now things are changing a bit in our universe of fitness. There's a new league this year, the inaugural season of the World Fitness Project, which is the top 20 men and top 20 women in the world have been signed to contracts to compete in 3 events throughout the year. I'm excited to be a part of that. I'm 34 years old in a week or two. If you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would still be competing at the highest level at this age, I would have laughed and thought there was no way. Somehow I'm still doing it. I'm still enjoying it. I'm still healthy. I'm still competing at a very high level. My friend Chandler and I just won one of the biggest CrossFit competitions in the world called Wadapalooza a couple months ago with our friend Travis here in Miami. So that was validation, I think, for us, that even though we may be a little bit older than the rest of the young and upper end comers in the field, we've still got it. So we'll see how this year goes. It's new, which is exciting and kind of scary at the same time.
Do you think this is is going to be a new standard, this new competition?
I think so. I think a lot of us are hoping that this league is super successful. There are things that CrossFit has done very well over the years. I'm so grateful for the life that CrossFit has given me and for all the experiences I've had at the CrossFit Games. There are some things that a lot of athletes in the community have felt CrossFit as a brand could have done better. And so this is an opportunity, I think, for there to not just be one brand that has a stronghold on all of functional fitness, and there's a new brand coming in that's going to do things differently and hopefully even better in some regards.
When did the mindset shift between, there'll probably be a point where you wanted to qualify and you wanted to get into the CrossFit Games. When did it shift to, I want to win this? Like, I want to be the fittest man on earth?
Believe it or not, my very first year, I had the mindset shift of just wanting to qualify and finally be titled a CrossFit Games athlete to thinking, okay, I actually can win this, and that's my new goal. And it wasn't until it was unfolding in front of me that I realized that that was a possibility. I stepped into my first year at the CrossFit Games in 2014 with no expectations. I think if you would have asked me before the weekend started, I would have been super happy to finish in the top 20. Somewhere throughout that weekend, as the competition had begun, I found myself in first place, beating the guys that I had looked up to for years and idolized and thought were these superhero action figures that I would never be able to hang with. And all of a sudden I was in first place in front of all of those guys. And that was so hard to wrap my head around at the time. And that was that period of time where I dealt with a little bit of that identity crisis of thinking I was much less than at first, finding myself in a position where I was greater than I had ever imagined, and feeling like I had to really embody that and portray that. In order to win, I have to act like a winner, and I have to act tough and act confident externally, when internally I was so insecure and shy and scared. And so that was tough for me to handle, the dichotomy between those roles. It wasn't very well received either. I think it was inauthentic and disingenuous, and people could read that I was trying too hard. I got some of that feedback. And I think in the next year, even though I had this newfound confidence, I shifted the way that I showed that confidence and projected it to the world. And it was much more of this like happy internal confidence rather than this arrogant, cocky confidence. And that felt a lot better to me. I think people enjoyed spending time with that version of me more so than the other. And so going into 2015, there was this newfound pressure of last year, I just wanted to finish in the top half. This year, I want to win the whole thing because I got close last year. And I had a handful of years from 2015 to 2018 where it was ups and downs, and I'd get really close again, but I'd make one big mistake and fall off, and never quite had that podium finish or winning finish that I was hoping for. In 2017 or 18, I don't remember exactly now, going into the final day, I was in second place and thinking that it was finally going to be the year that I would podium at the CrossFit Games. And on the final day of competition, I had one event where I just blew up, and it was an event that had rope climbs, and I felt fine going into it. And in the middle of the event, everything started to unravel. My grip went completely numb. And in the middle of one of the rope climbs, I just couldn't hold on anymore and fell from the top, and slowly watched all the other competitors continue to climb the rope. And I tried and failed over and over again, and went from sitting in second place overall, dropped down to like 5th or 6th place before the last event. And at that point, there was no way of getting back up into podium contention. So that was tough. Another one of those bittersweet moments where I was so close, yet so far from really achieving something that had been a goal of mine for a very long time. And I had to work really hard not to let that deter me, and to come back next year even more fired up because I was so close, and to try to finally make it there without anything like that happening again. And I guess you could say 2019 was finally the year that I was able to make that happen. I don't think it was so much that I made any major mistakes that I finished in second instead of first. I think it was just that Matt Fraser was better than everybody that year and a lot of the other years that he was competing. So he was the fittest on earth truly that year, and I did my best just to try to keep up.
Just on the point of being authentic and being yourself, and like finding yourself, it's a bit of a two-parter. Where did that feeling stem from? Was it like low self-worth? Was it no self-confidence? Or whatever you thought it was.
Yeah.
But then also, how did you overcome it and like truly become authentic and like start to be yourself in front of people and have that like? It's a lot better of a confidence. It's not bravado. It's not fake. Like,
for sure.
How did you find that?
I think that I can answer both of those together. Growing up being a little bit on the smaller side, I think probably played into my lack of self-confidence. In the sporting world, usually the bigger, stronger, faster athlete is going to prevail. I was never really that. And so when I stepped into this world where a lot of the guys that I was trying to keep up with were bigger, stronger, and faster than me, I felt insecure because I wasn't at the level that I needed to be in order to reach my goals of being competitive at the CrossFit Games. But also, I think if you strip away all those layers, pretty much every teenage boy at some point, I think, feels that internal lack of self-confidence. We're all figuring it out. We don't know how we're supposed to act. We don't know what it feels like to be a man yet because we haven't been one. And I think I was also going through a lot of that at the time, moving out of my house for the first time in college and not knowing what path I was going to take. I think there were so many things that played into my insecurity. And it wasn't like I was this introvert that was afraid to go and have a conversation with anybody, but I definitely just was always thinking, while I was having a conversation with somebody, I was thinking, what can I do to seem cool to them? What's going to be the right thing to say? And that would just always make me nervous and sweaty and intimidated because I was afraid of saying the wrong thing, or even more so than saying the wrong thing, just not saying the right thing. And eventually, I think I got lucky again in the sense that as I started to grow into the career that I had and to become the athlete that I envisioned myself being, that helped me naturally feel more confident in myself because I was starting to live my dream and my vision. I was starting to become the guy that I had looked up to for so many years. Not everybody has that opportunity, maybe, right? Unless you find that thing that you're passionate about and you fully pursue it, do you get to see yourself start to evolve into the version of yourself that you've always wanted to be. I think that was when I crossed that threshold of like, okay, I've committed to doing this. I've been doing it well for a long time. I'm starting to get some of the validation of competing at a high level, having some of that success, starting to get a little bit bigger, and that stuff allowed me to be more confident and more friendly, and in conversations be less in my head about it. And so it was kind of this positive snowball effect where the more that I was living as the person that I wanted to be, the more I got to do that in a carefree way.
I love that. Live
Does that make
authentically.
sense?
Yeah, live
Yeah.
authentically.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I love that. I feel it's a great message for the audience. Okay, let's switch it up to the sort of the mindset stuff.
Cool.
The psychology background, like how does that play? Does that play into it at all in your head? Like what was the kind of stuff you was learning, and have you carried it through? Or
I don't know the answer to that. I think a lot of the stuff that I studied in college, university, has buried itself somewhere deep in the recesses of my mind, and perhaps subconsciously I utilize some of it on a daily basis, whether it is the psychology stuff or the exercise physiology stuff. It's not something that I actively pursue studying anymore. I feel guilty saying that I've lost interest in that. Chandler and I were talking yesterday. He's very, I'll use the term nerdy, not in a derogatory way, but he like really enjoys the science of fitness and athleticism, and he digs into all that stuff and is always tweaking the data and using that to get better. And at a certain point, I think that became so exhausting to me that I decided not to spend energy on it and just put my energy into having somebody tell me what to do, doing that to the best of my ability, and trying to really enjoy the process of the rest of that. And that has kind of become my world. I know that's straying away from the original question of like, do I use my degree in psychology? And my answer is, again, I think it probably has shaped who I am. Like we talked about before, the things that you do are always going to shape you and the future versions of you, even if you're not directly doing that thing anymore. So even though I'm not opening a psychology textbook or reading data on exercise physiology, I think it does play into the way that I approach workouts, the way that I approach relationships. So I'm grateful that I did study all of that stuff and that it has turned me into who I am today. But until I close this chapter of being a full-time professional athlete and putting all of my energy into that, I think it's going to be a little while before I start to open those books back up and allow my energy from the time that I spend now training to try to be the fittest version of myself can go into something else, like once again being one of the smartest versions of myself.
Hope you're enjoying this episode with Noah Ohlsen so far, one of the fittest men on planet Earth. If you go to the Patreon link down below, you could have had early access to this and extra content from Noah, all in the Patreon community. Thank you so much for making this possible. Let's dive back into the episode.
let's talk about the internal mindset you have then at the moment. And to give this context, like, I mean, I've done like a handful of CrossFit style workouts. They're one of the most brutal things ever. Like they're so difficult.
For sure.
Could you describe like the worst of the worst workouts, like in a way that would, give us an actual frank look at what that is?
A lot of the workouts that we do are incomprehensibly difficult, unfathomably painful, but I've been in them and I've survived them time after time. Somehow still always end up coming back, even though I've been through some of the worst discomfort that I think a human could choose to put themselves through. There are workouts that are hours long where you're stuck in the grind, you're miserable, and you're just counting down the seconds until it's over. There are sessions that are short and fast, but so high power output or heavy that every cell in your body is screaming. But there's something about going through that and coming out on the other side alive and better, fitter, stronger, that feels so empowering. I've really enjoyed that I think over the course of my career, there also is a maturity, I think, that comes with your approach to those workouts. When I was young and naive and still learning, I would take every workout head on, full speed. And more times than I can count, that came back to bite me in the butt, where I absolutely imploded and just either, I don't think I've ever quit a workout, but have dragged myself through the end of it with absolutely zero energy left in my system. Eventually, you learn that if you want to be competitively successful, like with any sport, there are ways to pace and approach these workouts, these tests, these events that are going to allow you to sustain your power output and energy and effort more evenly across the workout, where you can finish strong rather than start really strong and finish absolutely exhausted. So believe it or not, I think the more that I've done it, sometimes it can get a little bit less painful. It's not necessarily because I've gotten better. I think it's just because I've gotten smarter about how to approach some of the workouts. Don't get me wrong, there are still some workouts that there's no avoiding it. You have to absolutely dig deep and be as uncomfortable as possible if you want to put up one of the best scores in the world, which is always what I'm trying to do. But I think that is something that is really encouraging to me, that I've learned in here, that transfers into everyday life, that no matter how difficult something is, I've always survived it. I've always come out on the other side and recovered and been stronger because of it. And I'll try to remind my wife or my friends, if they're going through a tough time in life, like, you've made it through things worse than this every other time, and you've always been successful. And look at where you are right now. Whatever this difficult thing that is in front of you is going to be the exact same, and you're going to get past this too. That resilience, I think I've learned in here from training and competing and trying and failing over and over and over again, but always coming back for more and being better every time.
When you're deep, deep, deep in the pain, like, do you have an internal dialogue or monologue that you say to yourself?
This makes me think of a mantra of mine that I've embodied for the last handful of years, that is happy but hungry. And my longest standing coach, Max El-Haj, who's a very good friend of mine, and I had a conversation when I first started working with him years ago about how many athletes that do what we do, because it's so difficult, have to go to a dark place and pull from pain and anger in order to dig deep and give it everything they have. And he tried to get me to go there. And I realized after trying and not being able to tap into that for a while, that that's not the way that I operate. I'm not someone that has a lot of deep-rooted pain and anger inside of me that I can use. And we had a conversation one day where I was explaining that to him, and I said, I'm just kind of happy. And I can see how that would seem like it doesn't fit with what we do, but don't mistake my happiness for me being content with where I am. I'm still really hungry. I'm trying to pursue greatness. Even if I'm happy with where I'm at now, I'm still hungry to get to where I want to go. I'm happy, but I'm hungry. And that was when Happy But Hungry came to life for me. And it's a reminder that you can always strive to be better, but you can enjoy the process along the way. And I think that's a misconception that a lot of athletes fall into, is in order to be the best, you have to suffer and be angry and be tough and not be having fun and smiling and laughing. And there are times when that's appropriate, where you need to work really hard and have to be very serious. And I do that on a daily basis. But as often as I can in between those tough times, I try to be as joyful as possible and have as much fun in the midst of all the pain as I can, because that's allowed me to have a really sustainable career as well. There are not almost any other guys that have been doing what I've been doing for over 10 years. And I think a lot of that can probably be attributed to the fact that I've enjoyed it the entire time.
I think that that idea of doing it from the pain and the hurt, it is a useful tool, but I think you crash and burn quite a lot. And I think you see that a lot of people self-destruct. Like it's hard to run on negative energy.
For sure.
It's powerful, but it's hard to do it. So I
Less
agree
balance
with
in
you.
that.
Yeah, less balance in it, 100%. And if you can do it from a happy place, we did this run recently, and my whole thing was I started it from a painful place, the 12-dayer, and by the end of it, it was about converting it into the love, you know, about the pain that I was feeling. Exactly that. And that changed everything for me.
I'm glad.
And yeah, I think people get addicted to that power of the painful place. So they get addicted to, this, I can rip up a deadlift. I don't have to worry about the pain. Like I can kind of sacrifice my body. But like you say, how do you do this for 10 years?
Yeah.
It's a different story.
Yeah.
I love that.
Cool. Thank you.
The mentality of a lot of guys getting into this and wanting to get into the sport, if we could flip it to a frank conversation with those people of like, or anyone trying to get into any professional sport and saying that they really want to be the best, they want to leave a legacy, they want to be great. What's the hard truth of this? Like, what would you say to them to like almost put them off from doing this and what they're going to be facing along the journey?
I think if you want to be the best at anything, you have to make it your life. I think for it to become your lifestyle and for everything that you do on a daily basis to fall in line with your goals is ultimately what it takes to be super successful, to be the best in the world. I think you can probably be pretty good at something and live a double life where there's other influences. And people have argued with me before that if I had a little bit less balance and a little bit less of that happiness and joy in my life over the course of my career, perhaps I could have been more successful. If I had made more sacrifices with my family, my wife, my friends, that maybe I could have actually won the CrossFit Games. And they might be right. But I don't know for me if it would have been worth those sacrifices if I had been a champion, but I'd lost my wife in the process and lost my friendships and relationships that I had built. I don't know if I would have, I mean, I know for a fact that I wouldn't be as fulfilled as I am now and with the balance that I've found. So I know that's kind of a contrast because I was saying you have to go all in, but I think I think probably most champions will say that they made a lot of sacrifices that probably hurt some people along the way. It's not the only way to do it. I think you can be super successful and still have healthy relationships and balance, but you have to ride that line and get as close to the edge of sacrificing everything else in order to be the best.
Was any other athletes or mentors or anyone whose like mindset and teaching sort of stood out? Like, you know, a lot of people like quote like people like Kobe or MJ and stuff. Was there anyone that you looked up to and like you followed those sort of teachings?
I've always been inspired by the greats, Kobe, MJ, Rocky Balboa. I know he's not a real athlete, is more of a character, but there definitely are athletes that have inspired me over the years, but I've never had one person who's like, that is who I'm looking up to. If anybody, it probably was Guido, who was the guy that I saw doing this at a high level at the very beginning. And it's ironic, I'm sure I've had this realization before, but it just struck me that he also lives a very balanced life where he worked hard and was very successful in competing in CrossFit, but was always an amazing husband, father, gym owner, friend, always had a smile on his face. And I think that probably inspired me to try to live a similar lifestyle. If he maybe hadn't been that way and had just been the guy that locked himself in the gym for hours on end, maybe I would have been the same. But I'm sure if you asked both of us if we would sacrifice our families for being champions, we'd probably both say no.
I like the balance. I think a lot of these people that we speak to who have, you know, maybe reached the championship or whatever it is, have a lot of regret about the sacrifices they made. And I think it still haunts a lot of people. And the true successful people that I'm always inspired by is somebody who managed to do both.
Yeah.
So difficult.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's impossible to be the best.
Yeah.
And maintain healthy relationships. I think some people do it. And there's probably a point at which you finally do reach your greatness and can go back if you've been able to keep those relationships hanging on by a thread, where you can now shift your focus into rebuilding those relationships and making amends and stuff. And maybe some relationships, some wives, husbands, partners, families realize that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and hey, my partner is going all in, and I may be getting the short end of the stick for a little bit here, but I recognize that at a certain point, they're going to be done pursuing this. And if I can hold on until we reach that point, then hopefully there's more balance in our relationship. I don't know. I don't know if it always works out that way. And I've not necessarily lived that life. I would hope that my wife would say that over the years, I've done a good job of giving her the love and attention that I think that she deserves, while I've also still been pursuing trying to be the fittest man on earth. And it's cool because a lot of those athletes also are providing pretty amazing lives for their families, wealth, travel, opportunity. Not to say that that stuff is worth sacrificing a healthy dynamic, but there's a lot of positive that you get, that if you can hang on until you can get the love and stuff that you deserve, maybe it's worth it in the end.
Something that I would get, I don't know, I'm sure I'd get a lot of crap in the comments if I didn't ask. I said this to Neve before we came in here as well. CrossFitters have, in my opinion, the best physique of any sport. I think like year round maintain like a really decent physique.
Athletic.
Very athletic, huge like muscle bodies in the abs. Like, is there a way that people can tap into CrossFit training, not 6 hours a day like what you're putting in, and gain, you know, that a physique similar to some of the, obviously not on the professional level, but you know, something to us that's close to or aspire to?
I think so. Thank you for the compliment. I think that the CrossFit physique of being really lean, muscular, athletic looking comes from the variety in our training and the balance between weightlifting, endurance, gymnastics, body control, having healthy bodies in order to get into the positions that we need to compete. Can you achieve that physique with an hour or two a day? Probably. I think that might honestly be something that I'd be interested in pursuing when I'm done competing, is finding a program that has the right balance between all of that. I think if you did a few days a week of some endurance-based training, kind of cardio, if you will, to put it simply, some of the CrossFit style training where it's mixed, like we were doing exercises where you're pushing the intensity, moving your body, moving some light to moderate weight around, 1 or 2 days a week of heavy lifting, and then 1 or 2 days a week of supplemental, like bodybuilding stuff. That balance probably would lead to the healthiest body, the best looking body. Yeah, I think that I've always been really interested in that too. Prior to doing CrossFit, was doing bodybuilding style training because I wanted to be jacked and shredded. And then I saw CrossFitters looking super jacked and shredded, started doing CrossFit, got a little bit more of that, but have always been tempted to lean into that even more. Like, I've done my programming for the day. Maybe I could do some extra sit-ups and some extra bicep curls just to be a little bit more defined, even if it's going to take away energy from my training tomorrow. So usually hold off on that stuff. I'm curious what it would be like if I pursued that a bit further. Very long-winded way of saying yes. I think if you were to implement some CrossFit training into your weekly protocol, it would definitely help in many ways with leaning you out and helping getting some of that definition, but supplementing it with some bodybuilding and normal cardio for your everyday average gym goer is probably the most well-rounded way to look and feel good.
I think it's that leanness that is so impressive, like with such big muscle bodies, like how, you know, I guess the training type is demanding that you maintain that muscle mass, demanding that your body keeps the tissue on its body.
I was surprised, sorry to cut you off.
That's it.
I was surprised when I first started doing this, how my midsection started to develop when I was lifting a heavy barbell in some sort of like loaded squat pattern. Prior to CrossFit, I would do tons of sit-ups and crunches and ab work. But when I started doing overhead squats and front squats where you have to brace your core in order to protect your spine, I think your body puts on muscle in that area in order to keep you stable and dense. And that's probably what you see from a lot of the CrossFit people. There's so much external loading that we're moving around that you have to really keep that core strong and braced in order to make sure that the rest of your body stays healthy.
Yeah, I hope that answers it for people, because I think I would get a shot if I didn't ask.
I'm also going to throw in there, because I know there's a lot of people out there that suspect PEDs, steroids, or whatever for
massive conversation
because of the ways that we look. I can tell you genuinely, and it's fine if nobody out there believes me, but I've never touched a performance-enhancing drug in my entire life. Creatine and protein are the furthest that I've ever gone with any of that, which is basically nothing. There are people in our sport that have been caught doing it. I don't know any friends that have ever openly said that they were using it to me. I think it is very few and far between, even though a lot of people out there believe that everybody that competes in a high level in CrossFit has to be doing it. I can tell you from my perspective, genuinely, I don't think there are many people that do.
I think that's really encouraging for people. And I think a really good evidence for yourself is that I've seen the photos of you from as you progress.
Yeah.
You can see the muscle body's developed quite quickly.
Yeah.
I think that is really encouraging for a lot of people.
Yeah, because I know when you see somebody that looks a certain way or is doing something that you want to do at a very high level, and you think, there's no way I could do that. There's no way they achieved that naturally. Whatever that mindset might be, it can be discouraging. And so you think, oh, they must have done this to achieve that. But I think if people are open to the idea that that's not true, and it did just take a very long time of putting in a lot of hard work, then it makes it feel a little bit more achievable for them as well.
Where would you direct people? Like if someone's watched this conversation, they're like, right, I want to pick up on more stuff. Like I thought the YouTube channel was fantastic, but is there somewhere else like do you have like a course or book, like somewhere people can pick up on like teachings, lessons and stuff like that?
I wish I did, and I think I will in the future. Right now, Instagram, YouTube are the primary sources of information and entertainment that I am putting out. I think that there's definitely a high possibility that in the future, when, as I mentioned earlier, I'm putting less time and energy into just training and competing, that all of that excess time and energy go into doing things that can help other people live their happiest and healthiest lives as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for today, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
That was amazing.
Pleasure.